So with the Q&A, um, thank you everyone. It was really just like it was great to see so many different like presentations on different topics. Um, if you would like to reintroduce yourself to our audience briefly, just with like a minute or two of your name, pronouns, your talk title. We can kind of do a little introduction for the people who have joined later for the conference.
Who goes first?
Whoever feels called to go first is okay.
I'll just get it out of the way. My name is Mishu Oliveira. My title is I'm a guide, integration specialist, mycologist, community builder, and I'm holding space for people with mushrooms for the last 6 years and have cultivated 24 varieties of mushrooms to work with my clients. I've also founded the Western Massachusetts Psychedelic Society, and I host weekly integration gatherings in the evening and in the morning every week. It's an honor to be here and to share my story. And my pronouns are she and her, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
My name is Taylor Flatz. I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner working in pediatric psychiatry, which I've been in as a nurse and now as a nurse practitioner for the past almost 10 years now. And I currently work at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I am also a second year, well, now third year PhD student in nursing at the Ohio State University, where I study the effects of psychedelics in adolescents, experiences, and outcomes. And I'm also the director of community for IPN. So if you guys have any thoughts on that, how we can, you know, make your experience better or, things that you've really benefited from, please let me know. And I think that's it.
I'm Faith Halverson Ramos. I'm a licensed professional counselor and licensed addiction counselor and music therapist. I'm a doctoral candidate in music therapy at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. I presented on using music in a trauma-informed and culturally humble way in psychedelic assisted therapy. Um, my background as a psychotherapist was through the transpersonal counseling psychology program at Naropa, where I was part of the last music therapy cohort there. And so my work with people is heavily based on the therapeutic potential of transpersonal experiences and the individualized meanings that people make of those experiences and how music can support accessing those types of experiences and those parts of oneself. And I'm also appreciative of this platform to be able to share my ideas and to learn from others in the field.
Thank you. And Ada, do you want to briefly introduce yourself just for our audience members who are joining? You can do name, pronouns, and your talk title, a little about yourself.
So I'm Ada. I go by she, her. My project was about looking at multi-drug use versus no drug use versus single drug use and comparing across several different outcomes. I focused on stress for this project. I just got my bachelor's in neuroscience and psychology at ASU, and I'm going into my master's program now. I'm really excited to be part of this conference. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So for our Q&A here, what we'll do is I'll just kind of ask everyone a question from that has been submitted by the audience today. And so I'll just randomly pick someone. So the first question I have here is going to be for Faith. And so we have an audience member who is wondering about in trauma processing, clinical breakthroughs often require patients to lean into distressing emotional spaces. If your musical selection protocol is heavily weighted towards what the client outlines as like safe or likable during preparation, do you risk protecting them from the therapeutic distress that may be required to process trauma?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I don't think I made it explicit in my presentation, but the idea is not necessarily that the music used is all going to be client requested and client preferred. I think when a person is at the peak of that experience, um, perhaps having music that they don't have a personal association with is going to be helpful, as well as understanding that our perceptions of the music are going to be very different when we're under the effects of the medication or of the medicine as opposed to when we're listening to it in our ordinary state of consciousness. That said, I think um, my thought process and intention in using the preferred music is more towards the beginning or towards the end of the experience as a person is coming back into themselves, if they're needing to have that sort of musical support to resource themselves and to feel more grounded and to come back into their bodies. But I totally agree that trauma work does require a willingness to lean into the experience, and that's where safety, a sense of safety and a sense of trust, um, is necessary. If a person doesn't have that as a foundation, then I think it could be dangerous to ask a person to lean in to the distressing feelings or content that may be arising.
Thank you, Faith. And then my next question here is for Ada. So I have an audience question here. They are wondering, from your talk, since the data comes from a self-reported anonymous online survey, how do you view the potential for selection bias here? For example, do you think users who have had difficult or negative experiences might be less inclined to participate compared to those who maybe had more positive or even mystical experiences?
Yeah, I think that either positive or negative experiences could shine through a little brighter when people select themselves as opposed to clinical studies. But from what we saw in the results, it seems that it's a pretty even distribution because we didn't have very much significance, whether it be multi-drug use, no drug use, or just like one drug being used. All the results seemed pretty similar. So I think it's definitely possible that people are who have either very difficult or very good experiences that they could have selected themselves. But I was surprised by the results, and I think that they may suggest that it's a pretty even distribution.
Thank you. Um, our next question here is going to be for Michu. So this question from an audience member, they are wondering, do you think these experiential differences could be preserved if psilocybin concentration could be assessed per strain and used to standardize dosage? They go on to mention perhaps the difference in subjective psychedelic effects are dose mediated and perhaps influenced by expectations going into the experience because of the reputation of strains for potency or pronounced visuals.
It's a great question, and I'm happy to answer it. And right off the bat, I'll answer the second one first. These results are from people who have had no experience and no research about what a golden teacher is or what penis envy even is. So when you're having people who have experience with psychedelic mushrooms and people who have no experience with any kind of altered states saying and sharing the same information of experience, you cannot not count that as a patterned response over the last now 6 years of this. So I feel that the mushroom variety itself is the experience, not the psilocybin, not the alkaloids that are creating the experience itself, but the mushroom variety type is the factor here. And over time, when more testing is done from a larger standpoint, these results will be made more publicly available. To my knowledge, in these last 6 years, I don't know that anyone else has done what I've done to come up with these results with different mushroom variety types and many people in a variety of dosing settings from micro, meso, and macro. So these results per variety type of mushroom are patterned across all dosing amounts. That style of the effect, the experience, um, people, 22-year-old people, 84-year-old people, experience, no experience. They're all experiencing the same thing with these types of mushrooms that are specific. So you have to start believing that, like cannabis, even though it all has cannabinoids, cannabis all has terpenes, but different strains of cannabis is going to affect you differently. And I would imagine when they start to test mushrooms, they're going to start testing mushrooms and find there's an entourage effect of these alkaloids that are providing similar things, like CBN is making you sleepy, CBG is helping you focus. Like I would imagine that there's certain principles or properties of mushrooms that are going to be offering specific effects based upon the amount of something. But that's just my last 6 years of very deep research and space holding with a lot of people. And the first question, could you please repeat that again? Because I'm not sure I really grasp the entirety of it.
Yeah, the first part of the question here was, do you think these experiential differences would be preserved if psilocybin concentration could be assessed per strain and used to standardize dosage?
So again, this is on the assumption that all mushrooms are the same.
Mhm.
Not so that question, I understand the framework of it, but when it comes to mushrooms that are offering different experiences, it's not about the potency. And to
Mm.
standardize it, again, standardizing psychedelic or even mushroom experience to me feels like it's the wrong direction. This is about sovereignty, and so creating a relationship with a very individual personality of a mushroom type is a way for people to have a relationship with themselves on a deeper level. So standardizing mushrooms or standardizing psychedelic practice really feels like the wrong direction, in my humble opinion. So
Yeah, thank you.
you're welcome.
Um, and then my next question here is going to be for Taylor. This may be um, a little bit of a juicy question. I don't know. I'm not sure. But we have a question from an audience member regarding your talk. So in psychedelic assisted family sessions, let's say, how would you kind of maybe suggest how do you maintain therapeutic neutrality and mitigate maladaptive like transference or countertransference dynamics among family members?
That's a great question. Um, I think that's something that even as I was coming up with this talk, like with this idea that sort of came to mind when thinking of like, you know, what situations, what sort of dynamics would be potentially problematic or, what do you sort of have to be mindful of because you wouldn't want to, in having these sort of like intersubjective experiences, you know, take on much of other people's, to the extent that it's overwhelming for like one person, um, to, yeah, sort of like have these boundaries blur and sort of have this like enmeshed dynamic. Like in family systems, enmeshment is sort of like this blurring of personal identity with other family members, and that's very highly correlated with like intergenerational trauma transmission over time. And so that is something that I was sort of looking at, granted this is quite different, but looking at studies of like psychedelic communitas, like, where, people have these sort of intense experiences of unity and how that's, in that particular setting that is viewed as something that's really beneficial for, people feeling so connected. But um, I think because this area of like families in particular has been studied very much, that might look very different in families, like, where it might feel really good to connect with strangers because then you're going to leave after. And so it sort of is this like, maybe more transient thing in the context of a retreat. But this hasn't really been studied in terms of like the psychodynamic processes between family members. So I imagine just sort of theorizing based off of the sort of communitas and like group session literature that as a therapist, you would need to attend to the individual processes and sort of know when, being engaged with someone is maybe not, is sort of like, beyond the threshold of a person's distress capacity at the time, being able to like balance, like, because really, like in family systems and sort of broader systems, having a sort of healthy balance of, coming together and pulling apart is really helpful. We're trying to help each person individuate and sort of differentiate on their own while also maintaining connectedness. And so I imagine during the session that might, be something that's very physically grounded, like being able to like have time and space towards one another, and then and also, paying very clear attention to the preparation and integration components to say like, this is something that we want to, this is sort of what we're going for. And this is something that, we might say, okay, I think it's maybe time to like, to step away from one another for a second, or, maybe want to stay there and integrate that. That's really, up to the person to sort of continually consent throughout the experience. Um, but that's definitely something that, is not entirely studied. And so I'm not sure how integration would look like amongst family members afterward who are all integrating together. Um, and that being said, psychedelics are practiced within families like, in different indigenous contexts, like the Santo Daime communities, for example, in Brazil, there's like multi-generational families, who will go on to integrate these experiences. And so it might look different for those who have a history of doing this together over time versus those who are, this is a brand new experience. They haven't had that level of like intersubjective connectedness or unity before. So I think it will really depend on the person in in the family.
Thank you, Taylor. I think we have some time to do like one more question per each person. So I'll go back to let's see, Ada. So the next question here for your talk is As this is a cross-sectional study, looking at a single time point, how do you plan to unpack the direction of your research moving forward? Um, how would you unravel whether trauma is driving the substance use, or if polysubstance use itself is overlapping with other factors?
So, unfortunately, that is a pretty big limitation with the study that I'm working on. I didn't design this study, but I've been in charge of it for a while. So, although I'm not completely sure how I'm going to handle that moving forward, what I want to do is look at things like a background of childhood adversity and other factors that may give us a clue into whether one thing is driving the other. So unfortunately, we won't be able to make any complete conclusions about it because it is, a one-time cross-sectional study. But I still think that it will provide a lot of important data, especially since we haven't really done that much digging into multi-drug use. So there will still be a lot of important information, and I'll do the best I can to dig in from there. But currently, there isn't as much of a plan as, I'm still working on the beginning of analysis and things like that. But I'm hoping to be able to figure some stuff out with that, at least.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to seeing your future research. And then let's see. Next question is going to be for Faith. We have an audience member who asked, you spoke about cultural humility as requiring practitioners to examine their implicit biases and power dynamics that they bring into the therapeutic space. They're curious about how you apply that same principle to the theoretical framework you're using, how to distinguish between genuine cultural humility and assumptions that arise from a particular critical or postmodern lens.
Yeah, I think for myself, um, maintaining an attitude of curiosity is important, and an openness to um, not knowing what another person's experience truly is, and recognizing that there is a limit to what I know. And so then being open to asking the other person about their their experiences or their perceptions, so that I can, check myself to see if some of the ideas or perhaps presumptions or hypotheses that are coming up for me about a person's experience really match what their experience is. So if I were to encapsulate it into two pithy words, I would say curiosity and openness, um, to the other person's experience, because really what matters is how is the client that I'm working with, how are they interpreting and making meaning from the experience.
Thank you, Faith. My next question here is going to be for Michu, and this question is from an audience member. Because of your having experience working with mushrooms and listening to people's life stories, how do you practice your own conscious integration and set boundaries to make sure you aren't absorbing other people's material or clients' trauma?
We all have our own. I have my own history of, I've done basically a 2 year extensive macrodose per month. Um, I was in a life crisis and I was in a very bad place in my life, and mushrooms helped me to reinvent myself and to see my opportunities basically. And so I've had experiences where I've been depersonalized, I've seen entities, I've had a lot of really wild things happen to me. And I understand the psychedelic space is opening consciousness. And it's also opening psychic insight for people to connect with their own meaning of trauma and history and ancestral connections and shadow and inner child wounding and mother wounding. And so when people are coming in contact with these, uh, when they're speaking, I'm hearing where it's coming from. It has nothing to do with me. And what I'm able to do for them is to hold the mirror for and redirect them back into themselves for their empowerment, for their sovereignty. I don't take on someone's trauma. That's their trauma. I'm here to help them become empowered to face it and become safe to trust their own intuition, to have their own answers for why it's hard, why it's scary, why they don't trust themselves, why they don't feel that they can be part of this world. What's missing? How do you take on someone's trauma? This isn't that way. So when I work with people, or when I have the opportunity or the privilege to hold space in whatever capacity, when people are talking, I'm here to listen and have humility and hold space for them. I don't take on what's not mine to take. I have my own, and it's well sorted. And I come in from humility and from a place of offering my personal experience, and now, gratefully, the experience of many other people on a similar path. We're all very different, but we're all very similar in our pattern thinking and how our responses and triggers and all of these things play together. So, if you're working with people in a way that's working with psychedelics or consciousness opening medicines, the humility and the truth of understanding that it's not about taking on someone else's trauma. We're here to empower people, not take it on. And so if you're taking on someone else's trauma, if you're becoming triggered by what they're sharing, it's time to look into your own work at that time.
Thank you, Michu.
Thank you. And
It's
good question.
beautiful and well said. Yeah. And then my final question here is going to be for Taylor. Um, with this, we have an audience member who wanted to say phenomenal talk. And your argument is sound and very compelling. Do you know of anywhere that is doing this type of treatment, or is this a proposal?
I do not know of anywhere that's specifically doing this type of work. Um, and thank you for glad you like to talk. Um, yes, I don't know anywhere that's specifically working with families. Like the stories that I've heard of those who are working with families have been in like underground practitioners who are sort of have their own way of doing things, and people going to different like retreats, group settings just with their family members. So, but none that are like specifically geared towards looking at family systems dynamics. So yeah, if anyone knows of any, I would love to hear about it. Um, Granted,
Yeah.
there are like, I mean, I'm guessing also like if this is, well, maybe this is a question for the audience member if they want to like talk about this, like who they're like if they're looking for themselves as someone who's like, not a part of a community in which this is practiced typically, like because there, like you mentioned, there are different communities that use this, you know, as a, sort of spiritual practice, not necessarily therapeutic, but from a therapeutic lens, I don't know of any. Um, and this is, yeah, this is a proposal, I guess, like that's sort of a theoretical proposal for like looking at family dynamics in existing sort of populations that are in, engaging psychedelics in this way for like research, and then, also potentially at some point to be able to actually, enact this on in a therapeutic or in a research sort of way.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. Yeah. I think about like we hear a lot about like couples like psychedelic assisted therapy and like group work. So it is quite an interesting proposal thinking about how if it's something that is integrated in more of this like Western or even medicalized context, like what would that look like and that dynamic? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm,
and there are a
yeah.
few studies of like that are looking at individuals like Heroic Hearts Foundation, for example, has a I don't know if it's like a study or like they sort of help spouses of military veterans go to receive psychedelic assisted therapy. So it's like individuals within the family, but not necessarily like together. So sorry, Bianca, to cut you off.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Another good example of the space. And Mitchu, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk to you off of the record also, but I've worked with several families in totality, and it's beautiful to witness, and it's very nuanced. It really depends on the family unit. It depends on the people, and it's usually starting from someone who is younger and needing care that is they have not been able to receive the care that's been helpful to them. So they're treatment resistant, and these are people that are young adults, probably in the obviously over 18 years old of age. They start, and then one of the other family members, a parent, maybe the mom or the dad, will then start, and then it's basically the last for 6 years. I think I've worked with four different family units in the last 6 years, starting with one person, and then now 6 years later, I'm working with every person. And so the integration is beautiful. It's usually with one person, and then maybe we get all of them in one group, or I'm going to the house. Now it's also with the senior member, the mother, and I'm with a family right now. The mother's 84 and has really some advanced dementia happening, and all the children who are in their, my age in their 50s wanting to help mom one last time. What can possibly help? They're all researching. So meeting them at the house and everyone. So it's very nuanced, and it's going to be tricky with a medical model because the medical model is spiritually bypassing what's happening with mushrooms, unfortunately. So that's going to become something that I foresee to be a challenge in the very near future. This is not about a breakthrough. This is about connecting with aspects of ourselves that are not from a Western medicine model or Western psychology model. So when you're working with family, you're working with generational trauma. So we have to start including language that speaks to that. And yeah, I'm curious to see what happens in the future. And thank you for letting me add and share here on that piece. I appreciate it. Yeah.
I'm totally gonna follow up with you offline. I
Let's
have like so
let's
many
talk.
questions. I'll
I would
spare
love to
everyone.
talk. In fact, everyone here, I'd love to have a separate meeting with. I have questions for all of you. Yeah, yeah. And thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Thank you so much, Taylor, Faith, Ada, Mitchu, for a really great Q&A session. We will send you the audience questions via email just so you have them to think about in your future work here. And yeah, I really enjoyed watching all of your presentations and yeah, just really appreciate you being here today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that you've done too, Bianca. You've done amazing here. You've done an amazing
Mhm.
thing.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you,
Thank
Bianca.
you.
Thank you, PsychedelX team. This is
Thank
Yay!
you.
awesome. Yeah.